Why should I send my stereo mix as a reference to the mix engineer? There's a few reasons why. The main one being that when we receive your stems, we want to know that when we play back those stems, I mean, bear in mind, this is the first time we will have listened to the song. We won't know what the song is supposed to sound like. That's where the stereo reference that you've produced will indicate exactly how it should sound. We'll then play back. We can then hit play, listen back to the playback of the stems, reference from A to B to the reference mix that you've sent, and go, okay, he's forgot to do this, or automation has been left off. This really important effect that is very much part of their production has been bypassed, and that without this reference file, without this mix as a reference, we do not know. There's no way of us to physically know what is missing from the stems that you've sent. The only guide that we have is when we press play on that mix to listen to what the playback is. So we really, every mix engineer should be requesting that you send just like a print of the mix, exactly how you've, like a demo mix. Like, every producer will produce a song and they'll put everything together, and they'll have an end result before they go to mixing. They'll have an end result that's like, right, that is my song finished. That's what we want to hear as a reference. We want to hear your song, how you intend it to sound, finished. It gives us a reference point for the playback of the stems, to ensure that those stems are 100% correct and that we can start mixing. The other thing, that the reason why it's good to send this reference mix, is we can gauge by listening back to the reference mix what your intention is for certain sounds. For instance, if you've got a pad in your track, or a string, something like that, there's no way of knowing. Let's say all the stems are normalized. There's no way of knowing the intention for the volume of that pad. Is it intended to sit at the top? Is it intended to sit at the front of the mix? Is it intended to sit really low in the mix? Is it just a layer that lays along the back of the mix? Nobody knows. The only person that ultimately knows, and there's no right or wrong answer to this. It could be loud, it could be quiet, it could be very subtle in the background. The only person that knows exactly where that balance of that pad or that string should be is the producer, because it's his intention of where he wants to put it. So the reference mix is used just to literally reference to it and go, right, okay, that pad, that producer, he intends that pad to be used as a layer that just sits behind the mix as just a nice subtle pad. Or you can listen to it and go, right, okay, he intends it to be loud and prominent, and it's a key feature of the track. Things like that. So we can gauge, using this reference track, we can gauge exactly how things are supposed to sound. Certain things, like, as well, producers, might bypass a reverb, take the reverb off. Great, nothing wrong with removing a reverb. But listening to a reference of what reverb you originally intended to have in your track allows us to listen to that reference and go, right, he intends a reverb that has a long tail, or is it a short tail? We can then gauge exactly what it is that you want, and ultimately the production of the song and the way that you've produced it is how you want it to sound. It's so subjective, putting a long reverb or a short reverb, or anything like that is so subjective. What I might like I personally, I like lovely washy reverbs because I work in Atmos. I love to use big spatial reverbs that are in 7.1.2. I like to use those reverbs, but if the artist doesn't intend a big reverb in the room, and they don't intend that to be over the vocal, and they want it to be quite dry, that's where the reference comes into play. That's when the reference says to us, right, Okay, they don't want a big washy reverb. They want a nice subtle reverb that just gives it a room feel. Okay, now we know that. There's no way of knowing any of this, right? Now, what you've got to bear in mind is when you're working with artists, like when you're working with producers, when you're working with mix engineers like us, and you're working via the internet, you're not sat here. If you were sat next to me here and we're working on a mix, I could say to you, how do you intend that reverb? Is that a big reverb, a little reverb? No. Okay, that's how you want it. We can also, if you're standing there, say, right, do you like this? No. Okay, let's try this. Like that? Yeah, wicked. Like that. That's the difference. Is you're not here. You're not here to say that. So that's what that reference is. That reference is you giving us all the indications that we need to understand how you intend that song to sound. And that's basically why it is so important to send a reference mix or a demo mix to the mixing engineer. And this doesn't just apply to me. This applies to all mix engineers. Every mixing engineer will appreciate if you send a reference or a demo mix. Not so much a reference mix, not someone else's song. We don't want to hear. It's not a case of someone else's song. That's fine if you've got an idea behind you that you want. I want to sound like this guy. By all means, send that. That's something totally separate. We're talking about an actual reference to what you intend the song to sound like and how you've put it together on your end.